All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's installment of AI in Construction. As you guys, some of you will know anyway, once a month we get together and talk about various things that are AI related with a specific focus on generative AI. Last month we talked a lot about prompting and how to get the most out of specifically generative AI. Really great discussion. This month, I wanted to talk about how we might connect some of what you're doing with ChatGPT and products like mine with SpecGPT to workflows in using automation tools that are out there. And to get that done, I've invited an old friend, Tom Nasser, whose company X-Ray Tech does this for a living. They're essentially an agency consultancy that helps companies and people to connect AI and other things to automate kind of low-level workflows, which we're going to get into in a second. I'm going to turn it over to Tom in just a minute, but first I wanted to level set for a couple minutes before we dive into the content for today. As you may have noticed, we're recording this. At least one person's using their note-taking. I have no problem with you doing that. So feel free to do that if you need to. So as I mentioned, we've kind of been on this path of describing and exploring what AI even is, how to use it, how people are using it. And now I want to open folks' mind a little bit to thinking that generative AI isn't like other technologies we've used in the past, in that it's creating work on its own that you didn't explicitly tell it to do. And that means that things like automations make more sense than maybe they did before. And at the same time, a lot of the automation tools that you would even use are way better than they used to be. And we're gonna talk about Zapier a little bit, and Tom's got a way bigger toolkit than even that. So today, I'm going to talk about generative AI as a component. So to set the context, Tom's going to take us through automations, why we would even do those automations. There'll be a discussion. I want to also invite anyone who's got a question along the way, pop it in the chat, and if we can answer it in the flow, I will. If not, we'll answer it along the way. I think Tom and I are going to probably do this again. So today is as much about introduction as it is about specifically getting anything done. So downstream, we'll be able to get a little bit more tactical. So let me start by why we're even here. So one of the things that made me think to do this is why we even love generative AI to begin with. As I mentioned a moment ago, it can do work. It's not just responding to inputs in terms of 1 + 1 = 2. It'll often be able to create things that are either new or certainly feel new. And that's kind of been true with some other things, but it can do everyday work. One of the differences I've said in the past between deep learning, which was powerful and exciting, but everyday people don't use it very much unless it's part of some other big product. In the case of generative AI like ChatGPT and all the other things we're seeing, it can directly do everyday work for you. It can write an email, it can fill forms for you, it can summarize things and other stuff we've explored. That gives us the opportunity to say, great, but if I have to go and navigate to ChatGPT, tell it what I want, give it all the information, then cut and paste it into something else, it's absolutely better than nothing. But what if we could take that everyday work and include it in everyday workflows? And that's a lot of what we're talking about today. I like to say generative AI can help with the blank sheet problem. That it getting started is often the slowest part of many small tasks. You're doing it over and over again. Maybe you're cut and pasting, but then you have to get in and actually create it. So getting a first draft or even a second draft is often a huge time saver, especially again for things that we do over and over and over again. And that's a lot of the theme of today is how are we taking things we do over and over again? They're not quite as mechanistic as just A + B, like if this, then that. It used to, I don't know, 10 years ago, where it would directly connect one thing to another. Here you're including work being done by generative AI in that flow, which just really opens up a ton of possibilities that we're going to explore as we go through this today. So as I sort of kind of mentioned, everyday work is connected work. So many tasks, you're already connected to a bunch of systems. It's your calendar, it's your email, it's social media, project management software, cloud storage, CRM, many, many more. In fact, if you just pop into Zapier, and this is just literally the first page of their integrations, you start to realize they've been pretty busy. So I think it's, what do they say, 7,000 integrations. Not all of them are distinct products. Sometimes the same product has more than one automation because it's the way APIs work. But the point is, there is a lot that you can get done, or that we can show you how to get done to automate things beyond what you might otherwise have expected. So you see, you've got Trello is in here, you've got Google Sheets is in here, email, both Gmail, and you can connect your other email directly to it, scheduling, Slack, so on. And again, this is just a first easy pass. There's a ton more, again, roughly 7,000 more ways that you can start to say, this thing keeps happening. I keep getting things in from HubSpot. I would like to have a response drafted. I keep getting things, I've put things in my calendar. I'd like to have, again, whether it's a response or an invite or whatever it is, drafted for me. I can quickly look at it and then I can move on. One of the other interesting things that you can just start to see here is things like RSS also means that if content comes to you because you've automated that from RSS feeds or something like that, you also can start doing things with it. So it isn't just your own plans and your own schedule, but honestly, the possibilities are pretty impressive about how you can put generative AI in the middle of content, invites, communications, all sorts of things to really speed things up. And again, automate the low level stuff that we all love to do so much. So why does this matter? One way or the other, we're on the beginning of a process. I think everyone will agree that progress continues to go very quickly. We're continuing to see. Hold on a sec. We're continuing to see more and more, quality and progress in the underlying tools and models that are being used. So, one way or the other, in the next year or two, you're going to have generative AI doing work, no matter what. This is the beginning of how that might work for you, but also you're going to see it elsewhere. You're going to be connecting it to your workflow software, but the software itself is getting better at these generative AI integrations. And sometimes they're building it internally on their own, which is pretty cool. So for the first time, we're starting with the assumption of integration. When I say that, I mean generative AI is perhaps the first technology that I've been thinking of, where from the beginning you're imagining, how am I going to connect this to other things, and how am I going to get value out of this? So with that, I'd like to welcome Tom Nasser, and maybe Tom, if you want to give a quick intro of what you're up to, and take it from there.
Awesome. Thanks, you. Really, really appreciate it. Excited to be here. Hey, everyone. First off, I'm so excited to see that there are so many people here interested in creating more time for themselves and their team. As we go through a couple different things today, feel free to throw comments or questions in the chat. And we definitely want to try to answer as many questions as possible for you during our time. So the first thing that I just want to clarify is, what is workflow design, and how workflow design and automation and AI sort of all relate together. And this is the discipline that we really think is going to continue to be most important as we design these automated systems for teams. Workflow design is designing the way that people work with the software they're already using, automation, and AI. And designing the way that people get things done efficiently and correctly and completely can really make a huge difference for companies and teams, as you're evolving your systems. So I have a whole bunch of resources for you all today. One of them I'm going to throw right in the Zoom chat, and feel free to click on it and explore. There's a number of different things on this resources board, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it in the chat, and then I'm going to walk you through what's actually on this board. So let's do it. Here we go, and great. So everyone should be seeing, if you click on that link and follow along, there's a couple of different things up at the top here. So Hugh was nice enough to tell me that a lot of people are on the Microsoft stack, using Microsoft Outlook and so many other Microsoft-based applications. So there are 3 things that you should know specifically about Microsoft. We've created 3 tutorials around sending recurring emails right here. This is specifically in Microsoft Outlook, which is a function that can be pretty annoying to do if you're sending a lot of recurring emails. This is a way to automate that recurring email sending through Outlook. This is creating automatic estimates with AI. And this tutorial actually is with OpenAI and Zapier, which will work with, Zapier works with as Hugh said, 7,000 plus integrations. So that's probably the most popular, definitely the most popular automation platform out there, right? Automation provider. And last is Microsoft Power Automate Beginner's Guide. So this beginner's guide, if you're already paying for Microsoft apps, you're already paying for, Microsoft Power Automate, and it integrates extensively with Office 365 and all of Microsoft's tools. So we have a beginner's guide there if you're just getting started on, your automation journey, building automations to support your company. But one of the resources here that I really want to highlight is this automation search engine that we built called X-Ray Tools. The whole idea is, can you see through all of the tools that are at your disposal so that you can build better workflows for your company? So maybe you're on Microsoft Teams, right? And I can just search Teams here. And lo and behold, here's Microsoft Teams. And maybe you're using Excel and Salesforce, right? So you see a bunch of these different tools. You can add as many tools as you like here. The whole point of X-Ray Tools is to help non-technical people understand what is possible to automate with the tools that you're already using. So if I go ahead and click on Salesforce, for example, we'll get a window that pops up. And let me just find the right window here. Here it is. So you get a new window that pops up, and this shows you all of the triggers, actions, and searches on Salesforce for every automation provider. So if you didn't know, Zapier and Microsoft Power Automate are not the only games in town. There are a bunch of different automation platforms, and these are the ones that we've indexed inside of this search engine. So you have Zapier, the most popular and has the most integrations of any automation provider currently. You have Make, which has a lot more technical extendability than Zapier does. It's just a little bit different of a UI and really made for somebody with a more technical background. Workato is really for enterprise. So they only have a few hundred integrations, but they're things like Salesforce, ServiceNow, big applications that enterprises run on. And Workato is priced a little bit differently. So, check out Workato if you're dealing with a lot of enterprise grade systems. Bardeen is actually a scraping tool that integrates in different automations around scraping. So you could get Facebook comments or Google reviews or whatever. Bardeen is going to be the tool to do that. If there's not an API or a programmatic way of accessing information, you're going to want to use Bardeen. N8N is a open source automation platform, very similar to Make and Zapier, except you can run it on your own hardware. So if you have any, if there's anyone really technical in this call that wants to automate, but wants to do it inside their own company, not on the cloud necessarily, not on the external cloud, right? On your internal, hardware, N8N is going to be your best bet there. And then Power Automate, Microsoft's version of Zapier, if you will. So looking at this Salesforce integration, for example, you have the triggers, and you can see all of Zapier, Make, and Workato's abilities using Salesforce as a trigger. And then you have, actions, which again, Zapier, Make, Workato have very different supported actions. And then you see Bardeen, right? And N8N, they have different actions. So as you're just starting your automation journey and you're figuring out what can I automate and what automation provider should I even be using, X-Ray Tools is going to be the fastest way to traverse all of these different automation providers around the tools that you're using right now, right? How can we make work as easy for people, to start off? X-Ray Tools should really be your go-to first place to look, because we had to build it for us, right? Building thousands of automations for dozens of companies over the last few years. We needed a way of quickly doing this for us, and we decided to make it open and free, Jesse, don't worry about that. It is free for everybody. Yes. It's just a search engine. It's just an indexed way to figure this out for non-technical people. This is not how we make money. this is just a free resource that we have that we give away. So if you like it, great. Let us know. Follow us on YouTube if you like, or something like that. That would be appreciated. But yeah, this is totally free, and should just be really approachable for anyone who's non-technical, trying to figure out what can I automate with the tools that I already use. So maybe we can go through one more example. Slack is a good example. They've got a ton of support on all these different automation providers, but you'll notice some really big differences in some places, right? So for example, Make has the ability to delete a file. Deletion across all apps on Zapier does not exist. Zapier intentionally does not allow deletion on an automatic basis. If you wanted to, you'd actually have to create a custom integration in Zapier to delete files. And there's all these little nuances across all these different automation providers that limit or extend your abilities with the tools that you're already using. So that's X-Ray Tools. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Hugh, stop me if I'm getting too in the weeds here.
No, this is awesome. So I think it might make sense to just talk about and maybe explore a little about when we say trigger, that's if this, right? And then action
Yes,
is
the trigger is what starts the automation. Yeah.
And what are some common examples that customers and clients of yours have used in their automations?
Well, let's look at some. A lot of times it's cross-departmental workflows. So things that start in the sales team, for example, when you win a deal, right? There's a lot of things that happen before that. But when your salesperson finally wins a deal in HubSpot or Salesforce or what have you, right? We can just say HubSpot. HubSpot has a ton of integrations. So get ready for a long list here. And we can say, these triggers are new deal or new deal updated stage. So in this case, you could actually specify, it doesn't need to be closed won. It could be proposal sent, or it could be, something else. When a deal stage is achieved, then go do something else. So a very common setup for sales team and the operations team is when a deal is marked as closed won, then we're gonna send an email, schedule a kickoff call, update something in the finance department, create a customer, create a Google Drive folder or a OneDrive folder, right? Start to accumulate or set up internal systems to accommodate for the project or the customer that you just won. So that way there, you're kind of offloading the operations and the onboarding setup internally to the sales team, right? You're just saying win a deal. And then all of a sudden, all of your internal systems could be configured for that new customer by using the deal name or the company name or your point of contact's email that was in the CRM that was part of the deal that was won. So I think that's a really good example of taking sales team energy and activity and proliferating it across the company to update all the internal systems that you want to be updated with this information, right? Hopefully your sales team is organized and rigid enough to have a good company name and a good, email address that you can rely on to, send a welcome email to or invite to a calendar event. But these are the types of things that cross multiple departments are really good for automation.
And one of the things I'd point out is it's kind of implied in what you're saying, but data is being passed through. So it's not just an alert, it's capturing those fields, and you get to assign sometimes, and sometimes it may be automatic, but fields are pulling data from one place to another and doing a lot of the entry for you, and also helping to avoid entry mistakes or whatever else might be true.
So I want to shout out one thing. I saw somebody in the comments, no PlanGrid integration first. Yes. So PlanGrid is a great example here. So PlanGrid is not inside of any automation provider that we have indexed right now. So are we stuck is the question, right? The answer is actually not necessarily. So let's actually do a Google search for PlanGrid API, it's called. So we actually have one, Autodesk API for PlanGrid. So what the API is the internal abilities of the app PlanGrid to connect externally to other things. So these automation providers that we're talking about, Zapier, Power Automate, whatever, they can still make a request into PlanGrid's API to create a project, to list all projects, to retrieve a project or update a project. You can still do these things with your automation provider. It just doesn't have a no-code way to do it. So you still have to programmatically add material, right, into Zapier or Power Automate to basically reference this API document. So you can still do it. Even though it's not no code friendly, it's still possible to automate with. And really, this is the limitation. If there is no public accessible API, then you cannot automate with your tool. A really good example of this is QuickBooks Desktop. You can't automate with QuickBooks Desktop because it's not connected to the internet, right? That's the whole point of QuickBooks Desktop. So there are some limitations with these systems, but first, check out X-Ray Tools. If there's a no-code ability to do it, fantastic. If there's not something like PlanGrid that isn't on X-Ray Tools, then you would get the API, and an experienced automator, a workflow designer, should be able to connect these APIs to your existing infrastructure inside of Zapier or Power Automate, what have you. So great example. Thank you for shouting out PlanGrid. I think that's a real important distinction. Is just because it's not on X-Ray Tools or not named in any of these automation providers doesn't mean you can't still automate with it.
And if I may, what you're going to also find is that the Procores and Autodesk and so on, people are pretty good at integrations with them anyway. So to the point that Tom was making, it's not a huge lift to get someone to create an integration, and tools like Zapier are really good at it. So both ends of it are pretty good. So the lift isn't enormous. The question would be first, though, making sure you know what you want. Because it's like a great example is the Procore API is massive. It can do it can access, I don't know what percent of Procore, but an enormous percent. So before you go to somebody, sit down and say, I'd like to get this data this way, or I'm going to use it this way, whatever it is. But start there so that when they look at the API documentation, they're not swimming in, literally in the case of Procore, hundreds of pages of documentation.
Yes, some of these can get really extensive. So definitely try to be specific, as specific as you can with what it is you're trying to do. It's only going to be helpful going forward. So I'm just going to stop this share for a second and go back to our resources board here. And that is...
While you do that, there was another early question about being secure. So emails and content that are confidential, which obviously in a lot of industries, construction is definitely one of them. How have you talked to folks about privacy concerns and security?
Great question. It really is a great question, especially with all the concerns sending information everywhere, right? You don't want to copy and paste sensitive information into OpenAI, for example. Please do not do that. So security, it breaks down into a couple different buckets. We actually made a video specifically talking about security, which I will add here in the resources board for anyone who really wants to know about Zapier security. We really is Zapier secure is the name of the video. So yeah, you can look at that if you want a little bit more detail. You can just refresh your resources board if you have it already open right now, and you should be able to see that video. But the answer to is Zapier secure and what about automation security covers a couple different topics. Number one, Zapier is as secure as all of your other online applications. They use encrypted, they encrypt their website just like you use, your credit card to swipe on Amazon and buy something. That level of encryption is also in Zapier. And they use, it's called authentication, to connect your app to Zapier. And then Zapier connects to all of your other apps. So that authentication layer is just as secure as any other application that you're using. They use standard, standard security, standard encryption. That is how the internet works. So as far as like your automation infrastructure and what do you want to automate with or not. This is a more strategic and philosophical question, frankly, if you want to automate this information. So being very careful about the information that you have connected to automation providers is relevant really when you're communicating externally to your customer, for example. If you're automating touch points and emails or phone calls or text messages with your customer, the last thing that you want to do is accidentally create a loop where you're sending hundreds of emails and it can't stop because of the logic inside of the automation. Now, that is rare. You kind of have to do that on purpose. But a lot of times when people are setting up more complicated systems for the first time, knowing where one automation ends and another automation triggers is a little bit complicated if you're new to the space. So we like to structure things in a way where you automate something and drop the information off in what's called an operational database, sort of like the middle ground. You're just dropping information off and accumulating this information inside of this database. It could be customer names, emails, specs about a project, documents, anything that is relevant to the operations of the company. So being careful about how you structure where one automation ends and one automation begins will help prevent you from accidentally creating a loop. But in terms of, is my information secure? Don't be automating people's social security numbers, right? That's visible in plain text. General best practices with your own online data security, right? Don't reuse passwords, stuff like that. It all sort of comes back into play with automation. Just use unique passwords. Don't be sending sensitive information like social security numbers through automation providers. And use common sense. Be careful with the information that you're connecting to, and be really intentional about the automations that you're running.
Excellent.
I see a question come in here from Planner. And are there tools to help us visualize the flow of men, materials, quantities to from the job site? I think the short answer would be no on that.
So if I can jump in,
please.
That's a little more than an integration. That's actually that's software that would do that. So if you have software that can take an output from P6, parse it, and start to kind of do the logic, what we're talking about today might connect those tools, but this is more beyond automation. What you're talking about, that's actually what software is for. So I think that might be just a little beyond what we're talking about today.
I think that's a good line, though. I think that's a good line of like, what is the difference between automation and custom software, right? And this delineation is really important. So what we're talking about here in automation and AI is just connecting OpenAI to a form on your website that says, hey, these are the specs of a job. What's my price, right? And we're just taking information from one place and throwing it at another, and then we're getting some transformation or some output, and then we're putting it in another existing application. We're not creating something, creating like a new application. A new application would be, visualizations on top of a new data set, or you want a button that's designed a particular way that connects to something. I guess that's a harder thing to describe.
No, but I guess the point is what we're talking about today is that whether it's ChatGPT, SpecGPT, whatever it is, there's an ability to create content and create sort of first drafts of things, but deeper logic and deeper software like we've just discussed, or all the things that a Procore does, or the Link does. That takes a lot of engineering and a lot of working through with users what it's going to be valuable. So I think I would argue that a way of thinking of this is if it's one hop of software, we're connecting from one hop to another. If it's like multi-hop with lots of interaction and lots of decisions to be made, typically that requires a lot more user interface than we're discussing today. Maybe that's a good way of I mean, because we did sort
Yeah,
of start by saying you can put ChatGPT or SpecGPT in the middle of this, especially the enterprise versions that will create drafts along the way. So I definitely want to not throw that one out. But the broader point is, published software usually does a lot more than that. It usually has just a lot of engineering decisions, that have been made in the development of that software. It's just
totally.
more than what we're talking about today.
Totally. So I want to bring it back a little bit to workflow design. Everyone's seeing my presentation, right? It's just a really quick presentation that I think can help orient a little bit more on this discussion. Awesome. So no surprise here. Individuals make teams, teams make companies, right? This is how what we really care about is like, how do we make individuals and empower individuals to do more with the time that they have working? So we've had literally thousands of interviews at this point of people that are frustrated with their workflow and trying to build a better way to work. And it all comes down to invoicing and payment processing, inbound lead handling, task and to-do management, client or team onboarding, and data visibility and dashboarding. These are like the most general categories that we get a lot of questions and requests from. So the problem here is that the choke points are not checkpoints, right? Knowledge workers, the people in your office especially, are your most valuable resource. Human attention, your attention, the fact that you're giving it to us right now, really appreciate it. But that's your most valuable resource, right? You spend it and you can never get more of it back. So sometimes automation could do this work between a triggering event, right? I got a new email, and an action event. I drafted a response to that email, or I put this information in my CRM, right? There's a lot of abilities that automations could do, but these pieces of software aren't actually designed to necessarily connect directly to each other, right? Salesforce isn't necessarily designed to work really well with Google Drive or OneDrive, right? It's just not. Those engineers at those companies, at those software providers, did the best they could for their piece of software. They weren't necessarily trying to make it easy to traverse multiple pieces of software in, a company who uses multiple pieces of software. So this is where that operational database concept is that I referenced a little bit earlier, where you can store variables that will get reused inside of different action events. So for an individual, it's pretty easy. If you're a company of one, you can use your own account and connect all of your pieces of software through Zapier. It's pretty straightforward, right? You wouldn't have that much of a challenge doing that. But where it's hard is where you're talking about teams. When you have teams of people, you need this extra layer of abstraction, right? Because it needs to work for everyone on the sales team or everyone on the marketing team or the operations team or whatever. And that extra layer of abstraction makes it a little bit more complicated to set up a system like that. So the way that we design workflows, when I say that term, designing a workflow, what we're talking about is capturing a really specific trigger, grabbing that information and serving it up for a human to make some sort of decision. And then when that person makes the decision, a whole bunch of other action events can occur. And this operational database that sits in the middle between your trigger and action events allow for generative AI to be inserted, your different IDs or really specific data points that your other action events need. So what it looks like is a robot-assisted workflow. You have a triggering event, accumulating information. You have a person deciding the right thing to do or inputting whatever other context the automation needs. And then the operational database fills in the gaps of whatever data is necessary to do all of these other action events. So this is a really powerful concept, and it's really what retains the operational data of your organization. So if you have, really skilled people that are making these decisions and participating in these systems, the context and the operational knowledge can be retained inside of the operational database or inside of this designed workflow, so that, if that person moves on, you still have the systems and the processes really programmed, right, set up, so that you don't lose all of that context if a key employee moves on. And retaining that operational knowledge is so important, especially as you grow in complexity and scale the company. So, having something like this is just such an asset. It's literally turning a process into an asset because now it's something you can refine and it's something that's valuable. And something you could share maybe with friends, companies, or somebody else. When you have it so tightly defined, it really opens up the world of possibilities.
Hey, Tom, one of the
Uh,
things that happens in construction, again, like other places, but I
yeah.
think because of the subcontractor and the contractor owner, just the organization of the industry means that sometimes there are double entry where you've got one thing, like one set of data about a project or a part of the project, and you need to re-enter it either verbatim or
Mhm.
certainly in a mappable way. So when you talk about your operational database, a lot of that to me is some of that at least is mapping, and then you put process and other things in there. How often have
100%.
you come across folks saying, look, the worst part of our job is having to re-enter the thing that we just spent half an hour entering? Do you find that that's a really good automation where that works?
Um, it- Short answer is yes, like all the time, right? Like that is one of the best use cases or scenarios for automation. If you're entering it twice, it probably should be automated. And you nailed it. Like if we're just zooming into this operational database example, right? The IDs of a customer in QuickBooks somehow needs to be mapped to the email address of the lead inside of HubSpot or something like that. Um, you can set up these rules inside of your operational database to automatically route this information to the right application or the right ID, the right user, the right whatever inside of your app. So, a lot of times when someone is entering in data in 2, 5, 10 different places, really the answer is, all right, let's have them enter it in one dedicated form and then automate the creation of that material, that information in all of these other places so that the person enters it once and then the applications magically have all this information pop up. And it's consistent and it's correct and it's done the exact same way that you entered it the first time, right? This isn't oh, let's find somebody overseas to manually enter in all this data that we have to enter in all these times. That's a human problem. Like if someone's entering in the same information again and again and again, there's a chance that there's an accident, right? So by automating this, you know that it's correct everywhere the instant you submit your form or your information. So absolutely, Hugh, that is a huge reason to begin to automate.
Yeah, I mentioned that because again, because of all the relationships, sometimes people are entering one thing in a Procore and another in a Trimble or Viewpoint. And it's a use case you hear a lot.
Totally. So just going through all of the other resources here on the resources board, I just linked here for you Zapier, Make, Airtable, and Power Automate. So if you want to explore all of those different automation providers, they're all right there for you to explore. We also have a enterprise services deck that is a little bit more wholesome for large organizations. On-demand support, creating a resources hub, discovering what your workflows actually are, documenting them for the first time in a lot of cases, and being able to really provide education and training for your team who is leveraging automations for the first time. Right after a workflow is designed for a team, we roll it out. We help people adjust and transition to the new optimized way of working. And a lot of times that is met with, your shoulders lowering about 14 inches. People are really happy about that. And just a phenomenal, consistent workflow on the other side of it. So there's that. And last but not least is a platform called Low Code Engineers. If you're curious about automating for the first time and starting to automate in your company, these are just bite-sized hourly packages to get started with a low-code engineer. They are phenomenal on low code engineers, working with everyone from Ben and Jerry's to, Northwestern Mutual, and it's a huge client list there. But low code engineers is going to be the most, bite-sized friendly way to get started with automating, 1 hour at a time. Pay for, an engineer to come in and talk with you and set up your systems for you. And any automator, if you ever hire anyone to do any of this type of work, please make sure that they are automating on your accounts. You should own the automation. It should be your Zapier account. It should be your, software, whatever it is. You pay that bill, and you also pay, right, the automator building your stuff. But you want to make sure that you're not paying an automator, giving the automator the software, and then they're building it on their accounts. Because then, if for whatever reason you don't like their cologne anymore, whatever it is, you want to be able to part ways. And if your automations are set up on their Zapier account, it's just a messy, unnecessary transition. So always make sure that any automator building for your company is building on your software, and you own that. That is best practices. And you should have a password manager like 1Password or LastPass, to be able to share and give them access, because again, you don't want to be giving anyone your passwords in any context. Using a password manager will keep everybody safe and secure.
Well, and I'd further say that most of the people, or certainly a good number of the people on the call, have an IT department that'll have an opinion about some of this.
Good.
So I think that one of the reasons why it's really good that the confidentiality and the broader security question came up earlier is that Zapier isn't, it isn't the kind of goofy thing it was 6-7 years ago. That it wasn't goofy, but it was a little more consumer. They really have built themselves out to be an enterprise solution or enterprise offering, and they certainly have what you would need for that. So I think that it's it's an easier conversation to say, hey, I'd like to use Zapier or some of these other tools. Obviously, HubSpot and some others people are using at the enterprise level anyway. Yeah. So I think that you get to involve IT without necessarily burdening them too much. And one of the things I would also point out, Tom has shared a ton of great resources on this call, and we'll follow up with that later. But also just going to Zapier and looking at some of their videos will start to give you an idea, because I think what most people start with is you hear a webinar like this and your first thought is, that sounds cool. I got it. Maybe the emails, maybe the there's a process you can go through which helps you to kind of focus and make it not quite so nebulous and abstract, and say, let's start with the things that annoy me, or start with the things that we do over and over again. And just starting with a list like that begins to allow you to maybe uncover, or certainly realize, things that you thought weren't automatable maybe are now, because like I said, 7,000 integrations just on Zapier, and what Tom's tool allows is obviously thousands more than that when you add them all together. The first thing that you want to think about, as I say, is let's start with what's tedious. What are we doing over and over again? Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about how you guys begin the guiding We're not going to do it live here because there's 70 people. But
Yeah.
how do you the thing I'm speaking to is, after listening to something like this, it can feel like it's a nebulous cloud we'll do one day, but actually you can make it into a process that's highly productive, and you get quick wins pretty fast. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call it, one of the first places to start, we call it a tool task list. So whatever you're doing today, even, right, you're going to go into your email and you're going to respond to leads. You're going to go into your project management software and you're going to update information, right? Whatever those tools are, make a list of all those tools. Your MX bill is a great place to start, right? Whatever you're paying for, that should be on the list. And then what are the key activities that you do in all of those tools? So in one that we looked at earlier, right, creating a project, updating a project was one of those things. So when you're creating a tool task list, you have your tools, and then you have all of the different key tasks that you do inside of those tools. And what you'll end up doing is looking on X-Ray Tools for the tools, and then you'll see your list of tasks, and you'll be able to say, well, everything that I do in this software is no codable, right? It's already on X-Ray Tools. I know that I can automate this. Or it's going to be missing, and then you'll check, the API documents to see if you can, code it. But generally speaking, it begins with a really slowing down of what you're doing and saying, what tools am I actually using? What software am I actually using? And then what do I do in those pieces of software? And creating bullet lists. That's it. It's really, really simple, right? I use these 10 pieces of software. I do these activities in each one. And then you can look them up and determine, is it no codable? Is it automatable? And then that helps shape where you begin, because you'll notice that some of your processes, right? Maybe employee onboarding has something to do with your HR platform, or maybe sales, right? Your sales pipeline. Like all of these different departments will have different tools, and they will have different tasks associated with those tools. And some of them will make sense to connect together. And as you make those lists, it'll be a little bit more clear for yourself, where you want to begin.
I want to speak to a comment that was just made, and I think it's an important distinction. I a moment ago spoke about including the IT team. What we're talking about here, the reason I said personal integrations, there's going to be sensitivity about how you integrate what, and some things are beyond the scope of what we're discussing here. This is kind of the point of today, is making folks aware of what's out there. And it's your decision about what path you take. So again, I'm speaking to a comment that double entry, really should be part of the project plan and have a level of formality and funding that's beyond what we're discussing here today. And I think that's a general watch out. Is what we're saying is that, look, things like responding to emails, things like, look, I know I have heard a number of times that within a company there's double entry of the same thing. So it's a little maybe different from that, but the broader point is all of this is saying there are tools out there that are easier to use than you might think, that can connect a lot of the tedium that drive people nuts. But there's absolutely a limit, and there's absolutely a line in saying, let's not create any new risk, and be really thoughtful about what we're connecting to what. I mean, again, the first question was about confidentiality. If there's ever been an industry that has a reason to be, cautious about what, hip bone you're connecting to what thigh bone, the construction's one of them. But there's a lot of things that don't really rise to that level, and that's a lot of what we're talking about today. So definitely not saying that you would go and do things that should take be contractually designed. Things that don't rise to that level is a lot of what we're talking about today. And Tom, I'm sure that you run into this too when you talk to folks, right? Is there moments where they say, I really don't want to touch that, but we can do these things over here?
Absolutely. And I think for someone just starting out, get the quick wins, take the low-hanging fruit. Because what happens is, as you begin to automate and you begin to set up these systems, more things become automatable. More systems you're able to imagine because you have this part already taken care of. I do want to touch on the question, Anthony's question here about maintenance. This is a great point, and this is actually a point for using automation providers. So a lot of companies, especially when they get big, they get excited to create their own software and to create integrations directly between pieces of software. This is dangerous. This is the thing that you need to maintain. For automation providers, that's what you're paying them for. If you're connecting, your applications, QuickBooks Online, Salesforce, whatever it is, to Zapier or to Power Automate, part of your monthly bill is being spent on making sure that those integrations stay working. So if for whatever reason any of your applications change their API, you can trust that the automation provider is going to fix that, and you don't need to worry about it. So there are scenarios where, maybe you have new data going into the automation or missing data going into the automation, and it creates an error, and then you need to fix that. That is one layer of maintenance. But in terms of like breaking changes, something that, in comparison to custom software versus, writing some no-code automations to connect your pieces of software, there's a big difference between needing a dev team to maintain your custom code and using Zapier or Power Automate as the middle layer that you can trust will continue to maintain their connections to all of your pieces of software. I hope that answers your question, because it is a really important note. Maintenance is not non-existent, but it's certainly nowhere near what it was if you were making custom connections, in 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even. It's really a different beast.
And that's I guess the point of someone saying I mean, especially in the case of Zapier, right? Like that's their whole business, is that we're creating connections and then we'll burn the time and effort. Awesome. So we've got about 8 minutes left. Are there any other questions? Any other things that people are thinking about? So Angus is asking about error handling. Want to have a quick look at that, Tom? So certainly one of the
Yeah, error handling. This is one of the areas that every automation provider is slightly different in how they handle errors, and how they surface errors for you. Errors occur for 1,000 reasons, right? It could be different data coming into the automation, or different data missing from the automation, whatever. There's a lot of different reasons that errors can occur. The most important thing is that you get notified about it, and that you can go in, or someone technical can go in and see the history. So the history of your automations is something that Zapier does an exceptional job of. They have an entire history of every automation that ran in your account, and also the data that automation processed. So if I wanted to look up Hue on in my automation history, the automation that I have that grabs my email and files it away in our CRM would have Hue's name in it. So I'm able to use that as a search parameter to find the specific run of that specific automation. So when I guess the point is, errors are going to happen regardless of what you're building. It's technology, errors occur. But the way that you can remedy it and find it and fix it is all in the history of running, because you'll see what variables are missing or broken, and be able to triage and fix it as needed. So, if you want to get a little bit deeper into error handling and some fancy stuff that Xray has built to help with that, Angus, by all means, you can hit me up after the session. But error handling is a big problem for no code generally, but there is some technology coming out that I think is going to make it a lot easier for first time builders.
And I would also add that the Zapiers of the world, they give you the ability to try something. You know what I mean? Like you're not just creating your integration and hoping it goes well. So you're going to certainly, some of the errors that might come about because you've connected the wrong thing to the wrong thing, they know that's going to happen. So you wind up getting a lot of opportunities to test and try different things. Two things as we're sort of wrapping up. Number one is I took a look while we were talking, and it turns out that there is a classic Procore. There is a Procore integration with Zapier. What you're going to do with that is entirely up to you. But the point is, you're thinking about pulling information out, maybe to put into a Google Sheet or in various other things. It's up to you what level of security that may or may not imply. But the point is that a lot of what today is about is saying that things are becoming easier and easier to integrate with each other. And as you're doing that, you can put automation steps so you can just have it do some of the dumb work for you. And more things are going to be connectable to each other. I mean, again, the reason I said classic Procore is they've been so good about their marketplace for so long that it didn't surprise me that they've got something that can connect here. Obviously, you need to authenticate. Obviously, anything that's enterprise software is going to have its own protocols. But the point is the connector's there already. And the second thing I'm just going to put up here while we keep talking is we're going to do this again. Tom hasn't agreed on when yet, so we'll figure out the timing. But I'd love you to take down my email and Tom's email. And if you guys have thoughts on things you'd like to see if we can do, let us know. It'll be at least a month before we do this. Again, Tom hasn't agreed on timing. But I think, this is an area that's just going to continue to become more and more relevant and more interesting as AI becomes more part of what we do every day. But also, whether it's cloud, whether it's even on-prem, things are connecting to each other more and more easily as we get better and better at building APIs that are easy to connect and use. So there's a lot here. We've just sort of scratched the surface. So we'll answer those last two. I think we got two more comments. Yeah, so quick one is Amy, yes, I record this and I'll post it on YouTube. And I'll put it up on LinkedIn a few different times. I'll try to send a note to everybody. It's not the easiest thing to do. LinkedIn doesn't make that super easy. But I'll do my best to make sure I make a note to everyone here. If not, you'll find it on my LinkedIn tomorrow. So any other questions? Awesome. Looks like we're going to end on time. Well,
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much for really sharing a lot of different and really opening eyes to a lot of what's going on. As I say, the reason this is exciting to me is I see generative AI as being at its best when it's part of a workflow. And sometimes those workflows are going to be inside of other products, and sometimes it's going to be between products. And today was the beginning of looking at how it might sit between products. So thanks again for walking through all this. And folks, I'll make available to everybody, a lot of what we talked about today.
Thank you, everybody.